This video was requested by Jana Nader Nabil. I'm so sorry, I definitely butchered your name. Hello and welcome back to Quirk Analysis 101, the series where I give you a detailed rundown on the quirks in the world of My Hero Academia. In the last video, I discussed the ability that belongs to the most despised character in all of the series, Minoru Mineta, poor little guy, and his quirk, Pop-Off. In today's video, I'll be discussing the quirk that belongs to the bubbliest, most cheerful and uplifting gal of Class 1A, Ochaco Uraraka. But before I begin, I'm going to give you a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button and bell icon to keep up to date with all of the new, amazing content the Lunchtime Crew is producing. Now, without further ado, let's float on over to the ultimately uplifting quirk that is Zero Gravity. Zero Gravity is an emitter type quirk which first appeared in chapter 3 of the My Hero manga and episode 3 of the anime. This quirk grants its user the ability to remove the effects of the planet's gravitational pull on any solid object. Essentially, whatever the user touches becomes weightless. This ability is activated when the user touches the object they wish to make float with the pads on their fingertips. Subsequently, if the user wanted to cancel this quirk's effect, they could do so by closing their fingertips together. This quirk can also seemingly activate itself if the user is not careful. This actually isn't said, but is shown to us through cute little visual indicators, like Uraraka holding a mug with only 3 fingers in fear of accidentally making it float. I like to imagine when Uraraka first got her ability, she accidentally activated her quirk while high-fiving or hugging her friends, and as she walked off, they just began to slowly float away.
Oh, hey, Mr. Lunchtime, long time no see. What the hell is happening? Mr. Lunchtime? Mr. Lunchtime, help, help!
Classic Dave. Okay, so now for the quirk's abilities, which for a pretty straightforward quirk, Zero Gravity actually has quite a few. There are your standard close range abilities like stopping a person from falling or touching someone and causing them to float away, but there's also some more complex abilities with names. The first of which we see in the series is called Skill Release. This ability, the user makes their enemies or opponents float, and once they're in the air, the user cancels the quirk, causing their targets to quickly plummet towards the ground, causing some serious fall damage. Now, we've only seen Ochaco use this move on robots, but if it ever were to be used on a group of people, let's just say you'd need to clean up an aisle tree. There's also a variation of this move called Meteor Storm, where instead of floating people or enemies, the user levitates a large quantity of rubble or debris and then drops it onto their opponent. And there's also a more advanced team attack version of this technique as well, which Uraraka performs alongside Froppy, in which Uraraka makes herself, Froppy, and debris float. And once all of them are in the air, Froppy uses her tongue to fire the debris towards their opponents at high speeds for a quick but devastating aerial attack. This move is called what the fuck? Okay, so I looked it up, and apparently Fafrotskis is when objects which don't usually fall from the sky begin to fall from the sky, like frogs, fish, or coins. Damn, whoever named this one needs a promotion. Another long-ranged attack this quirk can use is the Comet Home Run, in which the user floats some rubble and a pillar, and then uses the pillar like a baseball bat to launch the rubble at their opponent. As for mobility, this quirk has some good options. The user can make their own clothes and any other equipment they are carrying weightless, granting them more freedom of movement while still offering them the benefits of the equipment and clothes they are wearing. The user can also make unconscious allies and enemies weightless to transport them easier. They can deflect heavy incoming projectiles and create decoys by making objects levitate slightly above the ground. The user can also make themselves weightless, allowing them to float, giving them an advantage in the air while also allowing them to mobilize easier and gain perspective on their current terrain. And finally, we have what seems to be Zero Gravity's current ultimate close range attack, Zero Satellite. For this move, the user touches any and all objects in the nearby area, and then, by attaching multiple grappling hooks to the floating objects, they slam the objects into their opponent for a fierce attack. This move is essentially a close range version of Meteor Storm, but hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Now sadly, it is time to move on to this quirk's weaknesses. The first of which is the quirk's weight limit. This quirk only allows the user to float objects which weigh roughly under 3 tons. Now, as far as limitations go, 3 tons is quite a lot, so it's not that bad. However, every object a user floats causes a strain on their body, and the heavier the object, the more strain caused. Meaning that while the user could float multiple smaller lightweight objects, the user will only be able to float a small number of heavier objects. If the user gets strained too much, the quirk's effects will cancel and the user will become extremely nauseous. and can even be brought to the point of vomiting. The side effect of nausea also takes effect when the user causes themselves to float. So while using this ability on yourself can be extremely useful for mobility, it can also be extremely dangerous if not kept in check. But the biggest weakness of this quirk lies in the requirements for its activation. For this quirk to be used, the user must touch the desired object with their fingertips, meaning that if the user's hands were restrained, the quirk would be rendered practically useless. Or in a worst case scenario, if the user lost their hands or their fingers, then they would lose the quirk entirely. And as we know in the My Hero world, losing hands happens more often than you would believe. Watch out, Uraraka. But even with these weaknesses, this quirk does have potential to grow and improve. As we've already seen in the series, through some training, the weight limit of this quirk can be improved, meaning there's no telling what's the heaviest object we could see this quirk lift. Endgame Uraraka could be tossing buildings around just as easily as Deku tosses his body on the line to save a life. And then her parents could come in and rebuild them, making them rich. Was this her plan all along? There's also the fact we've seen Uraraka train her own body to get used to the floating around. So there is the potential for the user of this quirk to make their own body float without any of the repercussions. This would give the user a massive benefit in combat situations. And finally, we have a move I like to call Uraraka's anti-gravity shield, where instead of making a specific object float, she touches the ground and uses her quirk to make the area around her lose its gravitational pull, meaning that everything touching the same surface becomes weightless. This would be an extremely powerful ability, and judging by quirks which have similar restrictions to zero gravity gaining a similar ability after awakening, it's actually very possible that Uraraka will gain this ability. Anybody talking shit about Bubbly Girl now, best watch your back. And that's everything you need to know about the quirk Zero Gravity. This is an extremely useful ability both for combat and for crisis situations. Plus, in your everyday life, if anyone was ever bothering you, you could just give them a quick pat on the shoulder and watch as they float helplessly away to their demise. No one would ever know. But let me know what you think. Would you like to have the Zero Gravity quirk? And what quirk would you like me to cover in this series next? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Plus Ultra.